Welcome to the Mainline Arts Center in Haverford, PA, where tonight the Betsy Meyer Memorial Exhibition gets its first formal public reception. My name is Drew Zimmerman. Welcome to Lower Merion and Ardmore, and it's the odds. I'm speaking with Judy Herman, who is the Executive Director of the Mainline Arts Center. And Judy, what I wanted you to comment on is the person for whom this exhibition is named.
Well, Betsy Meyer was an amazing artist and a teacher who really helped open people up to looking at art differently and understanding how to explore their own voices and push their own art. And she also was a wonderful mentor for me. She was on our board and on our exhibition committee, and she really taught me to think outside the box. So when we lost Betsy and her family endowed this show, it seemed totally appropriate for us to do things that pushed artists to expand their horizons. So the Betsy Meyer show may change forms. It could be a video show, it could be installations, it could have a theme, it doesn't have to. But in whatever framework it's presented, it really needs to work to give artists opportunities to explore and push their own horizons.
Well, I'm in this show, and I think it was a fantastic opportunity. Is this the 6th year of this show?
It is the 6th year.
Right.
And at the opening tonight, her family, extended family, always comes.
Oh, that's great.
And she really has left a legacy for the Arts Center.
Thank you very much.
You're
Judy.
welcome.
Okay, we're standing with Ellen Grinnell in front of a picture that she's made for the show. And what I'm interested in, Ellen, is the use of materials in this work.
Drew, this is an acrylic emulsion painting, and it starts from the bottom up with the application of the gesso. The paintings are laid out, and it's a very active process where I spread the gesso out. I take sponge brushes and make circular motions in it and movement throughout it, and I allow it to dry, and some of the drying changes the shapes, but it comes out to be like neuron-like shapes underneath, before any color is really applied.
The gesso is a treatment for the canvas.
That's right.
In this case, you're using linen.
I am using linen, and it has a nice rough surface. The weave is very pronounced.
Okay.
And then I start layering colors on top of it, and also take tubes of paint. The container of the paint also is part of the process, and make the swirls, and I have to hold my breath, and I have to really get a little physical to get the shapes on there. Especially this work, I had to across the 3 panels.
Do you think of this as action painting, as something happening in that particular moment?
I would say it's a little different from action painting because it's a little more controlled in the way I put layers on instead of the loose pollet kind of paint.
Are the spiral shapes? They look almost like they're string, but that's just the density of the paint that you're using.
That is the density of the paint that's coming out and allowing it to dry before it's a heavy body paint.
Is the work complicated in that it's in 3 panels, and do you think of it as a triptych, or is that just a consideration for size?
I think it's a triptych. It's panels that are related to each other, and it's about memory. So there's things connecting back and forth between the panels.
Okay.
Are part.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Nice to talk to you. I'm talking now with Gina Gruenberg. We're standing in front of some figures that she's made that I think are sort of a signature look of the show. Gina, it's figurative art. There's not a lot of pure figurative art in this exhibit. Do you have a feel for that, or a reason why you emphasize the figure?
I just love the figure. I've been working with figures all my life, really, because I used to be an acupuncturist, and then I became an artist. And so it's a very comfortable thing for me. And I love wrapping people in these bandages because it's sort of like a meditation. And they feel like they're in a womb when they're wrapped in these bandages. And then to see themselves in another way is very exciting and fun. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of laughs about it, and it's mothers.
Right. And in the other room, you have something called fiscal responsibility.
Yes.
And they're all the same.
The same model.
The same subject, doing different poses.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me ask you this: did you choose this figure as an Earth Mother, or was that something that you added to it after you saw the result?
Well, to me, an Earth Mother is a large figure.
Okay.
And I don't know if you know about Venus of Wellendorf, but that was a really big figure. And when I made these, that's what just came to me.
Sure.
That they were Earth Mothers because they were like really, really grounded, big women.
Your work reminds me of work by George Siegel. Can you respond to that? Is it an affinity for the process, or is there something in his work that you're responding to?
When I first saw his work, it was in Washington, and before that I had been making lots of masks. And I was so inspired by his work because I had been using plaster bandages, and I just thought, wow, you can just do a whole person. And so I started doing it. And what I like about his work are his stories.
Yeah.
And that's what inspires me to make this work, is to tell stories.
Paradoxically, it is about the stories, but there's also a fabulous memorial silence that settles in among the figures. How about the fiscal responsibility piece in the other room? A comment on that? Your piece in the other room uses the same large Earth Mother figure, but you're using it in a different context. It's called fiscal responsibility.
Right. So that's to talk about the large fiscal problem that we are facing in the world. So all the money on the piece is mostly antique. Money from Iraq, there's money from, including Disney money. So I had a lot of fun making it.
Well, hopefully the magic of the Earth Mother will mix with the money. We'll get a solution to some of these problems. Yeah. Wonderful talking to you, Gina. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Drew.
Okay. Speaking now with Nancy Halbert, and we're in a room where the subject matter is organized because it has figurative arts. And Nancy, you're going to talk to me about the subject of your painting.
This is called The Bachelor, and my titles are important to me because they emerge after I've created the painting in a way that I look at it and I say, well, who do I know? Who in my life does this remind me of? So as I did this, I thought of Hugh Hefner. I had all these different kinds of icons in my mind. The black, this is all fabric up here. So I was thinking of these black striped pajamas and a man in his bathroom, and that's his sacred place, reading his magazines, because this is cut out. It's actually an article that was about creativity and making art, but it also had Titian's women in it. So it could be a play on Playboy or those kinds of magazines, and yet it is of the highest level, an art magazine. And I do a lot of gesture. I was a dancer before and a choreographer before I painted. And I use a lot of my motion to evoke emotion type of line to express what I'm trying to get across.
Is there a physicality to the work then when you're applying the strips of canvas and when you're applying the paint?
Well, this is the first year that I started doing a lot with fabrics, and I used to be a decorative painter as well, and the fabrics lend themselves to a place that you can put the figure in and I feel like it's a home. My home is really important to me and how I created my home and my family. So picking the fabrics is like going into design. So then I feel really physical because I get to glue, I get to paste, I get to cut, I get to do all sorts of kinds of techniques to get to the end result.
You say that the article that's glued there, the printed matter, is from an article about art and about Titian.
It's called Artists and Their Creativity. It's dated like 1927. I just happened to find the book here actually at the Mainline Art Center. And I borrowed it to read because I also teach classes here and other places. I teach adults drawing and painting. And so I was reading about it and I just cut it out and I realized someday I'm going to use this for something besides teaching. I'm going to use it in a painting. And by mistake, it double Xeroxed when I went to Xerox it for students. Of course, mistakes make things, now I realize a mistake is a positive in my painting, not necessarily a negative. So the mistake seems to work because it gives it all of a blur. And the article on creativity is absolutely the opposite of what one would think with a bachelor in some ways in the way that they live traditionally. You know?
Well, I certainly endorse your use of accidents or collaborating with accidents in your work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hi. Okay, we're with Carrie Souders.
Yep.
We're standing in front of a wonderful work of hers called Fran's Quilt, and I wanted to ask her about the construction of this picture. You use lots of different materials. There's printing in it. There's fabric in it. Can you talk about that process for us?
Well, this is actually an old quilt that you can see is tattered, and it had been thrown out. And although Fran didn't make the quilt, it brought to mind it's of that time when the name Fran would be popular, and so I thought it was appropriate. But it's combining something that's been discarded with the new, and talking about and especially being mixed with text when many years ago when women used to sit around in the quilting bees, they basically weren't writing their stories, but they were telling each other their stories. So there was an unwritten language between women, and it was through these quilting bees. So also with women, and I like to deal with mixed media and mixing of oil paint and beeswax, and kind of taking something old that was discarded and very physical. There's a lot of physicality. There's ripping and tearing and sewing involved with creating a quilt, and it's a very physical painting in that I use my fingers to paint the paint on, and there's a physicality in that along with the text. If you read the text that I've incorporated into it.
Yeah, I noticed that you have a text that seems to refer to medical issues.
Well, or more just a transformation, and the way we're actually using. It comes from a body lore series that I did, in that now, back many years ago, women had similar concerns, and a lot of their emotional needs were met at these quilting bees.
Sure.
And now we're kind of doing the same thing that they did back in the day when they were cutting and ripping and tearing and taking old fragments and reconstructing something.
Sure.
And now we're kind of transforming our bodies. So
Right.
there's a parallel to that.
Right, definitely.
And a physicality to that.
I work in collage too. I use newsprint. I used to use print that I thought the text related directly to the picture. I don't do that anymore. I'm just looking at the pictorial aspect of it. What's your feelings about this?
I completely agree. I mean, there's a point in time you come up with an idea, it inspires you to do a work, and then it's all about color, texture, form, And it was kind of a jumping point for me. I like to have an idea, I like to have a concept behind my work, and then the text, everything becomes irrelevant when you're doing it.
There's one other material I have to ask you about, the use of the beeswax. It's none of your beeswax.
No, beeswax is something that I've been using in my work for years. I fell in love with it because I am a very I'm always have a lot of physicality and texture in my works, and a sense of the organic, or taking discarded items and recycling them. And for me, the beeswax brings to mind the human body. It's natural, it's organic, it's about nature, and it has this, to me, I use it as like a flesh-like, skin-like material that it's transparent, but it has a luxury quality to it, and a beauty, and even a scent to it. So I use it in its natural form. I rarely add pigment to it.
I don't want to just drop names, but I think of Anselm Kiefer when I look at your work, his use of tar over and over again.
And thank you. That's great. That's a nice.
Well,
I'll take that.
I think your work is very impressive.
Thank you very much.
You should take it as a compliment. And thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you for listening to me.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Since Turnabout is fair play, an artist that I just interviewed, Carrie Souders, is now going to do me the honor of talking to me about my work, which is hanging behind her. Carrie?
Well, I love your work. It has been a pleasure to see your work. I wasn't familiar with it, but it brings to mind a collage of found material, somewhat like my own. And one artist that brings to mind is Hundertwasser. Are you familiar with that artist?
Yes, Hundertwasser is a German artist, and I think, like myself, he uses lozenges of color and separates things along that terrain. He's also famous for making non-rectangular lozenge-shaped windows in buildings.
That's right.
And
That's
I
right.
just
Gorgeous.
love to have that.
That's really
My work are likenesses, portraits. I feel a little out front about that.
Is that why your work is square? And also, tell me about the frames in your work, which are beautiful and part of the piece within themselves.
Absolutely. I think it's square because it derives from photography.
Okay.
You know, I'm using photographic models, photographs that I took myself of the people that are in the pictures. And the use of the wooden frame, on the one hand, talks about the rusticness, I think, of my materials. I don't use paintbrushes, I don't use oils, it's found papers. And it's also a little nod to Joseph Cornell, who's a far better carpenter than I.
Don't ever sell yourself short.
All right. Thanks very much.
And what about the portraits that you chose, the individuals that you choose to study in your work? Are any personal to you? Or?
One picture that's here is of my father. He's passed away now, and this is a portrait that I gave to my mom, which is why it doesn't happen to be for sale. She won't give it up.
I don't blame her. It's gorgeous.
But I think it's important in the portraits, to have an idea of the character that you're talking about, and I'm trying to convey an impression that the person might make if they were there in the room with you.
And do you usually incorporate within the photograph a certain color palette that you have in mind, or does that come afterwards?
I work with the newsprint that I have available. I stock up a personal supply of colored paper, and a lot of the coloring determination comes from what materials I have on hand.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's
all right.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm standing with Marilyn Lavins. Okay, and she's the artist who did the work next to us, which I think is called the 40th anniversary of the
first moon landing.
The first moon landing. And my impression when I looked at this was that the history seems to be obscured. It's blurred, and I was wondering if you were suggesting that we've forgotten the 40th anniversary of the moon landing.
Oh, no, I really remember it very well because I was living in Buffalo, New York at the time, and have a corrugated copper here that the astronauts wore on the bottom of their boots when they went to the moon in 1969.
Okay. And you were telling me earlier, Marilyn, that there's a particular vision that comes into your work that comes from a personal experience with your own vision.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that for me?
Okay, I was in an automobile accident, and I, eventually lost the sight of I have to wear a prism in my eyeglasses in order not to see double. So that's why I have this double luminosity or the transparency.
Okay. So the images are doubled and overlaid in your work.
Yes, because that's what I see when I do not wear my glasses.
That's fascinating. Thanks very much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
I'm Ruth Wolf. We're standing in front of a picture of hers called Shadow Catcher. And I want to ask first, is this a narrative painting?
Oh, yes. All my paintings are narratives.
And what is this the story about?
It's a story about the shadow catcher.
Can you explain what a shadow catcher is?
Well, a shadow is something that changes with the position of the sun. And if you try to catch your shadow, it moves because you move. So it's something that you can see and want to obtain, but something you can never really possess.
This sounds to me like you're describing one of the problems for all of art and for all of artists. What do you think of that?
Well, my painting is about painting, and my painting is about art. So the shadow catcher is really the artist in all of us trying to find the ideal.
And it constantly changes. The world constantly changes. It's hard to find our place. When the curator of the show came through, Julian Robeson, he talked about the space in your picture. Is that something you feel like you have an affinity for?
I'm mostly concerned with surface and the tactile quality of the paint. Whether there's a perception of space is part of the illusion of the surface, because the painting is a flat two-dimensional picture plane.
Sure.
And like base on a painting is also an illusion.
Very nice. Can I ask a technical question? How do you prepare the surfaces?
I prepare the surfaces many ways depending on what my initial intent is. Sometimes I prepare the surface with a gesso, which is white and very reflective. Sometimes I prepare it with a liquid plastic, which allows the color of the canvas to come through. And sometimes I paint on raw canvas and leave areas of raw canvas visible and play with that texture as well as the texture of the paint.
Okay, very, very good. Thanks for talking to us, Ruth.
The first thing I want to say to everyone is it is very wonderful to have 3 generations of Meyer family in this room. Betsy would be so pleased to see both of you boys here drawing in a gallery that she loved. And to see that you are part of a family of art is so important. And I want to thank your family, because your family has been supportive of art at this art center for many years. And this show, which is in memory of your grandmother, is very important to all the artists in this community, because she was such an example of an artist who taught other people and who loved to paint and be creative herself and wanted to see other artists be creative and to see the Art Center support that. So I know that your parents and your dad, Scott, and Andrew, your uncle, and your grandfather, Ed, really realized that having you drawing in this gallery is something very special. So today we come together to not only recognize all the artists who are exhibiting here in Betsy's memory, but to say that this is a show that, again, for the Art Center, pushes barriers, and to thank Julian Robeson for drawing it, although today he sounded like a wonderful curator as well. And also to present a prize to the artist who was chosen out of this show as really being exemplary, pushing barriers and resonating with us. So I just want to give this to Ed and Scott and Andrew to present to Karen, because her work is in the far room, but it's very exciting. Betsy was a MFA student at PAFA, and Karen graduated from PAFA 2 years ago. So.
It's a great pleasure that we have as a family to continue to sponsor this show as part of Betsy's memorial. Just by pure happenstance, today is Betsy's birthday. And so there's a certain poignancy about that, as I could not think of a better birthday present that she would like to have than to have this gathering of artists and friends and family in an area that she was especially drawn to, which was A, the art center itself, but B, pushing the envelope of art beyond just a traditional, although she was a traditionally trained artist, did go to PAFA and then went to the MFA program, so she had all of the teaching skills, the technical skills, but she also was very extraordinarily creative. And that combination hopefully will inspire the artists who are selected and to go on and continue to do what makes them happy and makes everybody else happy, which is creating art that people can appreciate, but most importantly, the art that the artists can appreciate. And the one thing that Betsy taught me was that I would always say, what does that mean? Very naive question, actually. And she said, it means whatever you want it to mean. And I know that was her approach to when people looked at her work, which was extraordinary, and when she looked at other people's work, which was a pleasure for her. It's got to be incredible to be able to have visual skills that allow you to see the beauty and the talent and the expertise that artists have. It's a skill that few of us have, most of all, including me. Hopefully my grandchildren who are here, and it's important for us as a family to see that tradition continued. It skipped one generation, but but nonetheless, I think we're going to see it continue. And so I've gone on too long, but the important thing is to award the first prize to Karen. Great pleasure that we give her the award, but in addition, it's everyone else is a participant in this, and hopefully next year, some of you, all of you, most of you, will all return with different works, different approaches to the subject of what makes art, which no one has quite figured out, including me, but it is the experiential part of it. And tonight we are experiencing it at its fullest. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank the artists. Thank you.
I'm interviewing Karen Steen now. She's the recipient of the prize this evening, a $1,000 prize from the Meyer family and from the director of the show. Karen, I'm very impressed by your work. when the Julian Robson, the curator of the show, came through, he talked about sort of an edge in your painting between the purely abstract and the figurative. Can you talk about that for us?
Well, I think that's true. The smaller drawings are more, I would say, descriptive of real life through the microscope. And I've done a lot of them over the last couple of years, so I have a lot of the shapes and patterns and negative space created by them sort of in my head. So I would say that this piece is more of an abstraction, my own personal, possibly kind of a whimsical interpretation of all of those realities.
Do you think of these as natural forms?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So someone said it was an amoeba painting. How do you feel about that? Not so much.
Yeah, I probably don't like that so much. I feel like it's a lot more. My interest in the microcosm is more than just depicting the microcosm. I mean, I have this sense that, there's this whole complex, intricate, beautiful system that makes up life that we can't see, but it is there. And I sort of feel that it's a metaphor for a lot of things, a lot of invisible things that are just underneath the surface. So it's a lot bigger, I think, than an amoeba painting.
And then there's the old idea of as above, so below. You're taking that in reverse and going out into the, as you said, into the astronomic from the microscopic.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and, as an artist, I relate to what you're saying about the interconnectedness of life. Sometimes when I'm toiling away in the studio and I don't know where it's going to end, I take consolation from the idea that maybe there's higher authorities and they're pushing me around when their own microscopes slide.
Yes. Well, I do feel like there's these underlying patterns that exist in life and life forms, and that we sort of respond to them because we're somehow familiar with them, because we're made of them. So
absolutely.
I don't know, I feel like abstractions are really familiar to us because they've been created by whoever put this whole thing together.
Sure. It's difficult to find anything that's truly an abstraction and on the other hand something that's truly real. I mean, everything seems to occupy the middle ground, doesn't it? Thanks very much for talking to us this evening. Again, congratulations. I love your work.
Thank you.
My name is Edward Meyer, and I'm the husband of Elizabeth Betsy Meyer, who unfortunately passed away 6 years ago. And in fact, this happens to be her actual birthday today, which is somewhat ironic. The idea for the show was spontaneous. After she died, I was looking for something, the family was looking for something to recognize her and continue to provide some legacy. And she was a long-term participant at Mainline Art, both in the as a teacher and also in the board of directors realm. And I thought it would be very appropriate to establish a show. She graduated from the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts and then went on to get her master's degree from APAFA in the first class that they had for delivering a master's program. And she was in a lot of different shows and is held by a lot of different collections, as it turns out, including the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. And so I thought, in consultation with my children and my brother, that this would be an appropriate way to memorialize her life by having something that was organic and that would continue to grow and show over the future. And it's exciting, and hopefully it will continue on for a long time. Thank you so much.
I'm Commissioner Scott Zelov, and we're here at the Mainline Arts Center for First Friday. It's Friday, November 6th, and First Friday is here and many other locations tonight in Ardmore, here in Haverford, as well as Bryn Mawr, featuring original works by local artists. And there's quite a crowd here tonight. And First Friday is something that I hope you will all take advantage of. This is I think the third year for First Friday. Mainline.org is where you can go to find out the locations and find out the theme every First Friday. And it really is a wonderful activity here in our township, and a big crowd here tonight at the Mainline Arts Center, including my daughter Lily, who is not an artist but is putting up with me coming to First Friday tonight. Thank you.
Our evening here at the Betsy Meyer Memorial Exhibition at the Mainline Arts Center in Haverford is closing. We've had a wonderful time, not only in meeting the artists and hearing them talk about their work, but to see the sort of synergy that exists between these creative people. You can get quite involved in talking across communities and across different kinds of art. Been a wonderful time. This is Drew Zimmerman, and it's the odds.